Cher, welcome.
Hi, Jeff.
Hello.
Hello.
So, just a little context here. Cher joined Partfiniti a few weeks back, and as part of the onboarding process, we thought it might be good for Cher to interview me, to ask me a bunch of questions about Partfiniti and myself, whatever, to give her some context on what we do and why we do it. And we thought we should record it, and maybe it would be helpful for others. Who knows? So we're going to do that. So I'm going to turn it over to Cher. Cher's going to interview me, and we'll see how this goes.
Amazing intro. Amazing intro. Hi to whomever's going to watch this. And as Jeff said, this is just going to be a conversation about he and Partfinity and just his heart passion. So, you ready, Jeff?
Let's go.
All right. So, can you share just the story behind why you started Partfinity and what was the initial goal or what were you going for in the very beginning?
Sure. So I remember the exact moment and where I was when I kind of came up with the original idea. I was in my truck coming back from a meeting with a customer who was a contractor who was doing an estimate for a job. And he was he was installing fiber cabling systems and as well as copper and everything else. And what I noticed was he was going to all kinds of different sources to get information. Like at that time, there was physical catalogs, there was PDF catalogs, there was websites. He was emailing people, he was phoning people. It was like everything. I'm like, wow. And it was all okay, how do I find the part number that I need? How do I find the information on the part number that I need? And how do I get a price and delivery? And so at the time I was reading a book called What Would Google Do? And I'm like, oh, well, what would Google do in this situation? And the idea that popped into my head was, well, they would probably have every single part number loaded in some database somewhere. They would find this information. And so that it was one source where everybody could go to. So I'm like, wow, we should try that. And so at the time I was working for Fiber Connections. So kind of, you know, nights and spare time, I would kind of tinker around and come up with these ideas and whatnot. And so I found a thing called a media wiki, which is actually the software that um, Wikipedia is built on. And I'm like, okay, I can load this and I can go scrape the web and find a bunch of part numbers and load them and put them out there and see what happens. And I was thinking people would come and they would add part numbers, they would correct part numbers, they would do all kinds of stuff. Well, a bunch of people came. Nobody changed everything. Nobody added everything. Nobody did, any of the stuff I thought, except for really scour the site for my phone number to call me and say, "Hey, what's my price and delivery on this thing?" I'm like, "We don't sell stuff." Sorry, but that's kind of how it got started. That was, I don't know, 2009-ish or so. And then 2012 decided to kind of do this in earnest, right? So that's when I started Partfinity. And at that point, I'm like, okay, I got to load this database with all these part numbers. And of course, I was in the fiber optic cable assembly business at the time.
Yeah.
So when I came to those parts, I'm like, there's just hundreds of millions of possible combinations. There's no way that I can scrape those part numbers. I'm like, I need a tool to kind of build them all. So that's where we started. That's when I reached out and started working with a developer to kind of come up with what we call the PNB, which is part number builder and configurator. And that's how we loaded hundreds of millions of part numbers, right? Is we take the part number rules and then we generate all those parts. So that is a very long answer to a very short question, but that kind of gives you a little bit of history of
Yeah,
where we
no,
came.
it gives history and provides a framework. So thank you for sharing that. But since then, since 2012, and just this innate passion and desire to solve what posed as an issue for you, how has the business changed since then? So you started with this solution and the passion behind that. How has it changed since then in terms of where it was then and now?
So it's amazing. Like the first thing we sold was a configurator. Um, But it became fairly apparent not too long after that, what people really wanted was place to find parts, get price and delivery, not just for fiber configured parts, but for any part.
Yeah.
Um, and we saw how tedious that process was, right? Not just finding it, but quoting it. You have all these different sources, and we were working with distributors at the time, uh, and they would have multiple vendors, like literally hundreds of vendors, right, who would all have different part numbers and price lists and everything else. So we decided that we would shift, not really shift, but also add on to the fiber configurators, the ability to quickly quote basically anything. Um, and it became fairly obvious that speed is really important for these guys, right? For several reasons. One is the less time you can take to do a quote, you can do more quotes. And
Yeah.
the other thing is, what we noticed is the faster you can respond to your customer's request, the more likely you are to win that
I
business
mean,
because it's not
yeah.
always about price. So, so many changes over there. And that's just the kind of the business changes. There was all kinds of technology changes and people changes and everything else, but it's been a fun ride.
So it sounds like it impacts the output, the customer experience in terms of them feeling like that their urgency is the need is met. Would you agree that those are some of the things, aside from the process and parts in and of itself, that those are some of the things that you maximize on to provide the solutions?
That is 100% what we're about, right? Is reducing the time it takes to quote. I shouldn't say 100%. That's a lot of what we do. And on top of that, we're a firm believer in connecting people and
Yeah.
systems, not just people, not just systems, but the combination of the two is very powerful.
Hmm.
And and those connections, the stronger they are, the faster things seem to flow,
Yeah.
right? So the more we can kind of enforce or improve on those connections, whether they be, technical or whether they be personal, we found to be very powerful.
That's awesome. So, in the world of technology and how things are moving rapidly toward AI, how do you foresee that partnership between the person and technology relative to Partfiniti? Like, what is your long term vision for the business in the next 3 years, 3 to 5 years?
It's a great question, and honestly, I think it's one. It's October 2025 right now, and it's one that I think every business leader is asking themselves right now. Um, and it is such a moving target. The rate at which new things are coming out is just unprecedented and unreal, and honestly, a little bit overwhelming. But our focus has been, I mean, from day one, we've wanted to be ahead of the curve and not behind, right? So, I
Hmm.
mean, we've
Hmm.
had probably for over a year now a product out there that leverages AI to increase the speed in which we can respond to a quote, right? So it's this quick example is that there's a Outlook add-in that will basically read your email and create a quote based on the contents of the email, whether it be a PDF or a screenshot or Excel file or even just the body of the email. So that's baby steps, but what we're thinking now is we got to think bigger than that. Um, we're that is basically adding AI to an existing product, and we're spending a lot of time these days thinking about what is an AI native application that does what we want to do. And it's really exciting. I'm not. I don't have any answers yet. I love where it's going. We have a framework for sure, and the key is going to be uh, there's so much new releases. So ChatGPT, for instance, comes out with a new release every, I don't know,
Yeah.
3 months, well,
Yeah.
maybe 6 months at the longest. So what we want to be sure to do is not create something that we think ChatGPT is going to do eventually. We want to create a tool that gets better when ChatGPT gets better. And that's
Yeah.
kind of the driving force for where we're going with the application. So we'll see. It's going to be exciting times. I mean, you mentioned three
It's a
years,
journey.
but 3 years is like six lifetimes in terms of
Yeah,
AI,
I know.
right? It's now okay. What's going to happen in 3 months?
In
So
three months.
yeah,
So this question is twofold. What about the company Parfinity right now excites you the most? And is that whatever it is that the driving force for how the company makes the money?
It is a twofold question. So I will say my most exciting part of the day is our daily stand up. When I get on a call with a team that is around the world with a bunch of smart people who care about the business, our users, our company, what they're doing, they're excited. I mean, that to me is the most exciting thing. It really gets me going. Now, what I'm focusing on these days, which I'm is a little bittersweet, is I've realized it's not what I need to do next, it's who I have to become next. And I have to go from being a business leader that's creating a product to a business leader that's creating a company and a team. And it's different. And I realize that what I struggle with is I love the product. I love building tools that do things. And so to get away from that, I know is one of my goals and my challenges, but I'm convinced that that's where we need to go. So, I mean, when you combine that with a team of smart, dedicated, hardworking, caring people with this new technology that's going crazy and making us go faster, um, I'm very excited about where we're going.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So we have the product that is built to last in terms of being able to do what it's supposed to and designed to do in terms of the company. And then you have the team orientation and focus, making sure that you have the right personnel to match the technology. So, what about the customer? Like, walk me through what a typical journey is, or what the journey is for a typical customer from discovering that Partfinity is their solution to them actually being involved and what that life cycle looks like.
So it's a good question, and it's one that we've spent a lot of time on recently. We spent a lot of time recently really kind of defining who we are to who. And we have three sort of main customer groups, right? We have manufacturers that have configured parts that need a configurator or a part number builder to create their part numbers and quote them. So that's one. The second is the distributor, right? Who has all these manufacturers who they need to get pricing from and they need to sell to all these customers. And then finally, not so much customers, but more users are the installers, the contractors who are buying from from the distributors. Um, so our typical journey is somebody will find us on LinkedIn or on the web or whatever, reach out, um, and it's fairly high touch, right? So um, it's not cookie cutter. What we do, we've been building this product that we have Fortune 200 companies using this enterprise type product, and it's complicated. So it's not a like sign up online and start using Perfinity from a manufacturer distributor point of view, because there's a lot of kind of understanding some of the nuances of like where you're getting cost from, where you're getting price from, how are you setting up your customers? Do you have pricing rules? And, are there discounts? Are there special prices? All this
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuff. Which once again makes the quoting process, when you get it right, the quoting process is very fast, right? When you can define all that stuff ahead of time, you set up the rules, you can make it almost instant. So that, there's typically a few demos that we do. And then once we go through the demos, then, there's a kind of an analysis of their um, partner configurators and, what it's going to take to get those built and online. Uh, yeah. And then, once we get them on signed up, then we do a lot of the heavy lifting to get you going, right? A lot of the setup falls on Partfinity, especially with these part number configurators. There's other configurators out there, but they basically give you a license and a password and say, here you go set
Sure.
up your configurator. Where we're much different. We're like, hey, give us your data. We'll create these for you and get you going, and then away you go. So
So how do you identify, or like what are the markers or principles, I guess, to identify what a good part number is? Like how do you differentiate that from what isn't? What mistakes do other companies make that Partfinity doesn't? You know, that we maximize in.
there are a lot, and we've seen a ton of part number systems, right, over the years. Um, there's some simple, real simple things. The first one that pops into my head almost every time is, are you using an I or an O in your part number? And if you are, you shouldn't. And that's because we've seen time and time again people mistaking O's for zeros and ones for ones for I,
L or I, yeah.
or vice versa, right?
Yeah.
It in some ways things are getting better because there's a lot more copy and paste
Mm-hmm.
um, or scanning of barcodes and that kind of thing. But if you've got to type it in and you're looking at something and it looks like an O, but you type a zero or vice versa, it causes a lot of problems. But that's just one thing that I see, probably that I see the most causes problems. There's other things like we believe that it should be a consistent length, right? And we're talking about smart part numbers, and there's a whole wouldn't call it a movement, but there's ideology out there that smart part numbers are bad. And their argument is that they don't keep up with the times. As you have to add more things, they don't adapt well. And for the most part, they're right. If you're just looking at internal part numbers, 100% they shouldn't be smart part numbers. Maybe one categorization code at the beginning, but that's about it. But where smart part numbers really come into play is have if you can't list all your part numbers, if it's greater than 500 part numbers in a product family, then you need to give your salespeople and your customers a way to figure out easily the part number that you're looking for. Once again, it goes back to that the speed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what we've learned is with smart part numbers, people, if they use them enough, automatically learn the codes, and so they can just type them in because from memory because they know that these digits mean this and whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
that speeds up tremendously. The other thing it does is when you don't have a smart part number for products like that, is it means that every time you quote or order one, you have to go and set up a brand new serialized part number or something, and that takes time. Once again, you can't quote fast if you've got to go through that process. You have to go to somebody who's going to set it up in the ERP or the MRP system before you can even send a quote or enter an order, and that just we see as being wasted time.
Gotcha. So would you say that that is a, the customers or even Partfinity's biggest pain point, or if not, then what is, and how do you solve for what the biggest pain point would be or is?
Well, the when we're talking about manufacturers of configurable products, the biggest pain point is setting up it. I wouldn't say setting up because they don't really care if it's set up, is the amount of time it takes to accurately and
Fine. Yeah.
consistently quote their customers, right?
Hmm.
Um, Many of them will use a spreadsheet, right? They'll have a spreadsheet that says, okay, you put this in here and you put that in there, and then it's going to spit out a cost for you. And maybe it spits out a part number and maybe it spits out a description. Problem is now you're copy and pasting that into something, and you're going to have to go through one at a time, right? It's time consuming and tedious. And when it's done in Excel, it's not easily trackable. Like, so your quotes that you send out there will have all these part numbers in here that don't really mean anything, and you can't run reports on them and things like that. So that's one of the biggest pains for sure, is the time. And if they're doing that, some companies have different departments that'll actually set it up. Like, so maybe engineering has to go set up the part number before you and assign calculate the costs and whatever before sales can quote it. And that's just adding delay to responding to your customer.
So how do you, in that process, how do you avoid overwhelming the users, in terms of the quotes? Like what are some steps that we can provide to not to overwhelm the users?
So there's a few things. One is in the initial setup, right? So I mentioned earlier, we'll set up the configurators for our customers. The first step is to go through, because typically they're going to send us a document that was created 12 years ago, and it's got every single combination of everything that they've ever quoted before.
Yeah.
And the first step on our side is to go through and say, do you still use these? Do you still use these? Like, are customers still buying this? And we have this, like, hey, we want to cover 90% of the opportunity of the part numbers, not all of them, right? There's certain scenarios where you need a specific part number. And if you're
Mm-hmm.
not going to sell that part number to more than one customer or more than once, then you probably shouldn't be using a smart part number. You should, engineer a part number and create a unique serialized part number or something like that. But those 90%, that's what we focus on, right? Those are day to day. You're going to crank out your regular quotes. You're not going to have to look anything up, and that's really where you want to push your customers to those um, configuration. So the next step, so we go through the part number legend and we say, what can we remove because you don't use anymore, or it doesn't make sense anymore? Clean that up. First thing. The next thing is we have a way to kind of filter down to the day-to-day runners, right? So
Okay.
yes, we create a configurator. It maybe creates, I don't know, 50 million part numbers, right? But it includes, I'll use a cable assembly as an example. It includes cable that you don't stock, but you could easily use a different cable that you do stock that would service the customer just fine, right? So we provide these pre-filters to say, okay, here, just look at these ones first, because these are the ones you want to sell.
Yeah.
And then we'll provide that to the customer and their customers to, when they first start looking, they can filter down to the kind of standard regular product that you want to sell and you probably want to buy. And I would say 9 times out of 10, the customer is fine with that selection. And often they don't even know the difference. So when they make a selection for a different one, because you've provided those options, they don't really care. It's just the first one they saw on the list or whatever.
Yeah.
But, that's not what you want to sell.
So, what have you come in contact with, or and I'm sure you have, ran into any challenges in moving someone or convincing someone to move from their legacy system and process and product to Partfinti, and how do you overcome those? How do you overcome that legacy, process to the solution?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, change is hard, and the bigger the company, the harder the change, for sure. And even when you convince, the company to get going, the user adoption also is hard. It's hard to break habits. Um, However, it's really about, people value their time, right? Whether they want to go golfing instead or want to be home with their kids or whatever, right? That's really about what it is. And when we talked earlier about reducing the time it takes to send your quotes, it's all about getting back that time. Now, the pitch, of course, to the company is, hey, if your salespeople have more time, they can do more quotes, you're going to grow revenue. And one of the great things about that is too, is if you're the fastest guy to respond, which often means you're going to win more of the business, because often customers are just waiting for an answer because they want to buy it. Um, then eventually your margins start creeping up as well, right? Because you don't have to be as low anymore because you're probably going to get the order. You got to be within the range for sure,
Yeah.
but you can start to, have your margins creep up a bit, which is, very helpful. It's all go straight to the bottom line in that case. So there's that side of it, and from a user point of view, um, it's very, once you see it, once you use it, once you see some of our other features, like being able to create a whole list of parts with just by pasting in some links, and you can create 100 parts at a time, you'll see all of a sudden, wow, this is so much faster. So
That's awesome. Last question. What is your favorite customer story or experience, and why?
I heard this, I didn't hear it firsthand. I heard it from my customer who was talking to their customer.
Okay.
all right, who was using Partfinity. Both the customer and the customer's customer were using Partfinity. And the guy was talking and he was kind of saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going to be here all night. I got to do this thing. I got to do this thing. Yeah, I'm going to be here all night." Kind of like, look at me. I'm a big shot. I got to,
Yeah.
really hard. I'm important. And then it was like, if I remember the story correctly, it was like, I don't know, 5 o'clock, and the guy was walking out the door, and they're like, "Hey, I thought you were doing this," and they're like, "Oh no, with that Partfinity thing, I got that done like 3 hours ago. I just imported the spreadsheet, and it pretty much did it all." So,
That's nice.
that was impactful, I think, for me to hear that, especially coming from a customer who told me about a customer.
Yeah.
Obviously made an impact to our customer as well. So it's great to see the impact that we have on people's lives. So,
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Jeff, I appreciate you for taking the time to answer the questions and just having this conversation. And
yeah,
hopefully you enjoyed it.
it was fun.
Yeah.
Thanks, Cher.
Thank you.